so much for tuning into today's session on family matters. Personally, I am super duper excited to have Steve and Emma because I've heard Steve for almost 1.5 months, that is like 7 times, and he's incredible. His teaching style and his analogies and his practical tips and understanding of the word is really, really amazing. And it gives you a lot of food for thought and challenges you every time that you hear him. And because, as Suhasini rightly mentioned, that Emma and Steve had a great journey together, as few of you mentioned that it's both with ups and downs, and they are parenting 8 children and 12 foster kids. We really wanted them to challenge us Indians on parenting, on marriage, on the role of women, and all the other aspects that they're going to cover. So, thank you so much, Steve and Uma. They, I mean, I'm very intrigued to know how you guys met because you guys met in Hell's and Angels Bar. The name also sounds like too, contrasting. And then after living a typical sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle, they were gloriously saved by Jesus at the age of 21. After several years of barrenness, they miraculously had children. They currently live in New Zealand. They are founders of Jeremiah Trust. They house pregnant women and women that are in crisis. Uh, they are pro-life um, supporters or believers. They've been married for 30 years. During this lockdown period and Corona time, they have been extensively occupied in doing a lot of charity in their own unique way to people around them. And they've been feeding around 500 families, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really incredible. So they have a lot to challenge us. I think all of us have to have our gears on in receiving whatever the God is gonna minister to us. And then I'm gonna chew this bit by bit. I'm gonna listen again and again and see how, so that I can grasp all of it together and see how I can make a difference in the place wherever I am. So thank you so much, Steve and Emma, once again, and over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Crystalite. And we just really want to honor you and thank you for having us on board. We're just thrilled to be here. And for weeks now, we've been teaching. You've only been looking at my face, Crystalite, but look, today, ta-da! You get to look at Emma. And she talks as well. It's amazing. So Emma's going to tell you where we met. You've spoken some very nice things about us, and it's almost a little bit embarrassing when people talk about us that nicely. We have some bad points as well, I just want you to know, and we'll talk about those. But Emma's going to tell us a little bit about where we met.
So I always feel hugely uncomfortable spending too much time on discussing how we lived away from God. So I would just go as far as say we grew up in families that did not have any religious connection to anything really. So we were both very lost, and we met in a bar. I was actually lining up the boys, kissing them one after another, and Steve happened to be on the end of the line and seemed to be quite a good kisser. So we went outside and had another kiss, and here we are 29 years later, and we're married. But I think for us it was a beautiful journey. We started dating when we were like 15 or 16, and we grew through our adolescence somewhat together. We went to America for an overseas adventure, and there God really revealed himself to us through miraculous people that turned up in a miraculous turn of events that we really don't have time to discuss right now. But I would say, we went to America 19 and 20 years old, and had no belief in any God. And by the time we left America, there had been so many miraculous things happen. We could not believe that there was a God that loved us passionately. And I had struggled with a life of eating disorders and panic attacks, and really was having a crisis as a woman as to who I was and actually what a woman was meant to be. I had grown up and become quite a feminist, quite a hard woman. And I had never wanted to get married and never wanted to have children. And, you know, when you're confronted with the love of God and he fills those places in your heart that have not been prepared and not been taught, nobody taught me how to be a woman of God. My mother was lovely, but she was lost herself. And so, you know, when presented with the love of God, it really transforms your heart, I think. And so, I mean, anybody that knew me at 18, after I was expelled from school and thrown off of public transport and thrown out of my house for being such an awful person, they would laugh their head off if they thought that I was a lover of God and mother of many children. They'd be like, no, not Emma, not you. So maybe if you don't take anything else away today, if you look in the mirror and you think, I am not worthy to be any of those things, you know, God has a real way of finding the most unworthy people and saying, in you, I have much value. And so, yes, so we met and it was the start of our journey.
Yeah, so we married, we had been together for several years, and both of us had had an encounter with Jesus, and then we decided to get married. And I think our marriage, I think God has a sense of humor, and he understands about putting two people together that are very, very different. I spent the first 10 years of our marriage trying to recreate Emma in my image, and it didn't work. This is not good. The Bible says, Genesis chapter 1, that God created us in his image. So I tried for 10 years to change my wife. Not good. Didn't work. She is a very strong woman. She's not an Indian woman, but she's a strong woman. She's like that really strong auntie that you've all got in India. You know the one?
I would actually interject on that one. And I'm a firm believer that a Christian marriage should be a marriage where two strong, if you looked at the analogy of a tree or a plant, that you should be able to grow together, allowing one another to develop how God had intended for you to develop. There should never be a time that one tree overshadows the other, so the sunlight, the love of God, is blocked out. I know that our cultures are very different, and cultures are very different around the world, but I think Christian marriage should be the same around the world, that there is no, you can't grow strong and straight and true if you're being lorded over by somebody else. We have had to learn to negotiate and honor the fact that we're very different people. We don't like the same art. We don't like the same music. We don't like the same people. Steve loves to talk to people. I don't love to talk to people. Steve,
have you noticed that, just move your head slightly, because there's a beautiful piece of art behind me. Can you all see this? This is Rembrandt, the prodigal son returning. It's such a beautiful piece of art. Let's just see. We're in my office at the moment. Let's just see if Emma likes this piece of art.
There is a reason that this is in Steve's office and not in our home, because it is dark and depressing.
Okay, thank you, art critic Emma. We appreciate your input into Steve's wonderful art in his office.
So, I mean, you discussed an enormous amount of topics that you wanted to talk about tonight, and Steve and I can sit here and talk all evening, but it would break my heart to think that anybody had left this Zoom meeting and not had a question answered. So I wonder if the best way to address this will be actually for you guys that have things that are really burning on your hearts, that you address to us, and we will attempt to answer. Now, our answer is our answer. We will try and be as biblical as we can, and we will use the good experience and knowledge of mental health that we have developed over 29 years of marriage. But our answer is our answer, and other people may answer it differently, but we will answer it with as much integrity and honesty and transparency. There is nothing that you will speak to us about that is too embarrassing, that we will not answer. But for you to come here and take time and go away not having known the answer or learned what you wanted to know would make us sad.
So, Chrysolite, how about you start with maybe a question, or if somebody else would like to ask a question, they can wave at us. If everyone would like to put their video on, that would be super helpful for us when we're teaching and talking to you. It's lovely to see your faces. So, Chrysolite, if you want to ask us a question, you can, or if maybe start with you and then somebody else.
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned that you were trying to recreate Emma into your image. That's one of the downs, or that's one of the areas that all of us struggle with. Would you like to throw us more light where we try to rub ourselves into the other person, and where most of the marriages kind of fail?
Yes, I think this is a very key point, and the reason why it's so important is because you can take the Bible and you can use Bible verses in your marriage to get your own way. It's a very the Bible is a wonderful book. It's God's word. I love it. I read it daily, have read it daily for 30 years. I know what the Bible teaches, but there are verses that you can use taken out of context and used in a marriage that can be deadly. So for things like how we should spend our money, our sexual life, things like what kind of food we should be eating, which car we're going to buy, what house we are going to live in, who does the jobs of cleaning the toilet and the bath, who is going to look after the children. If a man gets hold of Bible verses, and here's one Bible verse, and I'm speaking to all the men now, it's amazing. I can meet men who know nothing about the Bible, but they know this one verse I'm about to quote to you from the book of Ephesians, chapter 5. And it says, wives, submit to your husbands. Amazing. Men can know nothing about the Bible, but they know that one verse. And when you take that one verse and you hold that over your wife, you produce toxicity and sewerage in the emotional, spiritual realm in your marriage. Many women will put up and shut up, but that doesn't mean to say you're right. And you can be right over and over again. But on the great day, when we come face to face with Jesus, he won't ask us, were we right, men? He'll ask us, were you kind? Were you kind? And I am so challenged by that. And I have for years, like I said, tried to make Emma do the things or be like me or like the things that I like, until I really felt one day that the Holy Spirit spoke to me. Emma didn't speak to me. I felt the Holy Spirit speak to me and ask me a simple question. Why do you keep trying to recreate my daughter in your image, Steve? All of a sudden, I realized actually she is God's daughter as well as my wife. And I needed to learn to honor the gift that she is to me. And this has opened up a whole different aspect to our marriage, because there are many times when we are trying to ask God for direction. What should we do? Where shall we live? Should we spend money here? Should we work this job? Invite this person into our life? Should we do this? Should we do that? Where my eyes are actually blinkered and I have blind spots as a man. And if I'll humble myself and ask my wife what she thinks we should do, many times, I would say most times, she has a completely different way of seeing the situation. And she saved me, to be honest with you, from looking like a fool, from making the wrong decision, from spending too much time or energy on a topic that didn't need time and energy. Emma's feminine perspective, if I honor that perspective, it kind of allows it to grow alongside me and give me an incredible partner to work with. And that becomes a sort of way to negotiate together as we work together.
And I think that's it. It's a partnership, and it's not a prison sentence. It should never be a prison sentence. There should always be a place that there's a safe place to be heard. There should always be a place where you can come to one another and say, you know what, that hurt me, what you said, or you know what, I feel like we always do things on your terms and not on my terms. We probably renegotiate the terms of our marriage every month still, because life changes, people change, the things that you want to fill your life with change. We still have the demands of children, but we don't have the demands of babies anymore. So those things change, but we live in a world where we're not very kind to one another. And the feminist movement has probably not done itself any favors here, because Steve talked about the male side of it, but I often counsel many young girls, young women that have got one or two small children at home, and they're like, well, as soon as my husband comes home, he can have the kids. I'm stuck with them all day long. I've had enough. And they want to go and look on Facebook in the other room. And I'm like, and then they get very confused because they don't get a positive response from their man who's been at work all day. And then there's this whole tension that sets up through the evening. But the thing that was never negotiated that was what would look like, what your man has been out providing for you and your children today. Maybe give him an hour to wind down. What does he come home to? Does he come home to a wife that is tired and grumpy with baby sick down her front? Or have you set the tone in the house since you have had the privilege of being at home today? Have you made a point of changing your top? Have you made a point of making some food? Because it matters. Now, if both parents are working, then you really have to come to the negotiating table on childcare and cleaning, because it should never fall down to just the woman, and it should never fall just down to the husband. But you both have to come as adults to the table and say, I need this. Now, the wife might say, you pick up the children 3 nights a week. I need to go for a walk and prepare a meal before you all come home. Or the husband might say, you know what, I need to go out. I need to go to the gym. I need something before I come home. Please, you take the children, but I will put them to bed tonight while you have time. So there's a negotiation. But if there's ever that time where you're living in a marriage, in a relationship where you think this is not working out how I planned, it's time to talk. But sadly, often couples don't talk until it's too late, and they've already hardened their hearts. The damage and the resentments are so high, the habits are so forged between them, and the bitterness, that it's too late. And then I don't know what it's like in India, but here we have a sea of single mums raising children, and men that would just shrug and say, I don't know what went wrong. She just asked me to leave. Now, there's a lot went wrong a long time before that happened. And I think something that's really passionate for Steve and I is to really unpack that, because we've had some really hard times in our marriage. We've had times when we've had babies and I don't want to have sex, and Steve is still a guy and wants to have sex. Or we've had sick children that makes both of our hearts break and makes both of our hearts operate from a desperate place where we're not kind to one another, we're clawing for survival, and lost jobs. And we've raised most of our children in a country where we have no relatives, we have no other support. So if I'm away at hospitals with one of our children and Steve is running the other side of the family, we better be talking to one another. Otherwise, this marriage is going to sail to different shores. So talk, negotiate with one another.
That's really good, Emma. Thank you. Well done. Does that help, Chrysolite?
Yes, a lot.
Yeah.
Emma, I have a question for you. When Steve was trying to recreate himself on you, because most of us in India have this issue, how did you deal with it? I know you were waiting for him. I mean, God spoke to him, but till then, how did you cope with it?
We had many arguments. I stuck my heels in. I think for me, I was in that place of trying to find out who I was as a woman, who I was in God and what I stood for. And I think for the first few years, I was quite confused, because I knew as a Christian, I really shouldn't conflict with my husband, but I could feel these passions and desires growing in me that for children and orphans and children with disabilities. But I didn't see that in Steve at the time. Steve was passionate about preaching and going to Bible school. And so I found it quite hard I felt confused before God. But slowly, as I grew up and I spent more time in the presence of God, I felt more sure of being myself and being the woman that God created me to be. And to this day, I'm not, there are many things that Steve would love in a wife that I am not. And we can laugh about that now. We laughed about it just today as I was covered in hay, feeding the cows with my hair all crazy. And I think Steve would sometimes like a more glamorous wife, but the wife that he has got, I am okay to be.
No, I love this one.
and we can laugh about it now, but it took a long time for me to feel sure of myself and for Steve to honor who I was. And they both have to come together, because when the person that you love the most is looking at you saying, hey, you could be this. And in my inside, I'm going, no, but I want to be that. And so it takes some time and some developing. But I would say probably it developed a lot quicker in me when Steve honored what he could see growing inside of me, and say, well, you know what? It's lovely, Emma. It's not what I would have thought of, but hey, and that then you can bring each other on. It's like we go back to that plant analogy. I've Steve that I married was this crazy punk rock star. Steve, the man I know now, is a kind and compassionate father to many. Did it happen overnight? No, it happened because we honored one another. And I believe that we've been able to grow and give each other the sunlight that we need, and can honor that in one another.
And I have to say, especially again to the guys, it was quite scary to no longer try and control my wife. I really initially wanted to just control her, dominate her. The ego in me wanted to control her. But when I released her and blessed her and honored her and thanked God for her, not what I wanted her to be, but who she actually was, it kind of released her to be this very different kind of human being. And that's a real challenge for men, because our ego, our small self, as some people would call it, wants to control things. We want to make sure everyone's I'm in control. I'm scared, I'm frightened, I'm going to control this. But actually to let go and release her, it's created this larger than life woman around me that at times is hard to manage. At times, you know, it would be nice if I could just control her and get her to do what I want, because I want her to do it. But it just doesn't work like that. That's the nail in the coffin. That's the end of our marriage if one person is just being controlled and smothered by another. And so it has helped our marriage. And I think over time, as we've released one another to be who we are, it has a massive strength, and it is incredibly impactful, because the book of Ecclesiastes says two are better than one. So together we've got this kind of force that is able to take children, orphans, care for them, special needs children, all kinds of things that we've had to deal with.
And I think when you honor one another, then you come together, whether it be in conversation, fun, sex, whatever it is, you come together because you want to come together, not because you ought to or you have to. And, you know, our relationship had boiled down to that. In the first few years of being a Christian, I looked around and I thought, I ought to be this kind of girl. I ought to do that in the bedroom. I ought to dress like this. I ought to entertain this way. And after a few years, I thought, but I'm not being true to myself. God knows me, so he knows that this is all an act. And it brought death in our marriage, because I was there because I ought to be, not because I wanted to be. And as soon as we started to negotiate what fun looked like, what sex looked like, what childcare looked like on each of our terms, we got to understand one another. And then you can start living and not just existing alongside somebody. Which, I mean, who wants to be in a marriage like that? I don't want to share my life with somebody just because I ought to be with them. I want to share my life with my friend, who we're going to have fun and laughter, and some things will be hard and some things will be funny, and you can laugh at one another and with one another.
Well said. And to you, Chrysalide?
Yes. Is it important to have or identify our love language in our marriage? And we would want to know, what is your love language?
Well, I would say yes. So Gary Chapman, you can Google it, get the PDF, understand your love language, and understand it in your children as well. That's really important, in your children. And understand it in colleagues at work and things like that, and ministry leaders and people like that. But absolutely, love languages. So touch, quality time, gifts, acts of service, and then I think there's a fifth one which I never remember. So but for your information, because you're being nosy, Chrysalide, as to what our love language is, Emma's love language is acts of service. My love language is touch. So for years, all I wanted was for Emma to hug me, and all she wanted was for me to do the washing up and do the washing and the vacuuming and mow the lawns, the grass.
No, I did not want that. I wanted someone to take me out on a romantic date.
Oh, acts of service. Oh, okay, I got you. Okay.
Let's face it, as women, our love languages can change from week to week.
That's the problem with love languages. For men, the love language stays that their life. Tuesday's love language can be different than Wednesday's, and if it's sunny on a Thursday,
no, it's not.
It's not that love language on a Thursday. And then, you know, who knows what Friday can bring. So men have to constantly be working on understanding their wife. But having said that, Chrysolite, I would say this, and this is a really good question in your marriage. I would don't say this at bedtime. Okay, don't say this before you go to sleep, but say this over a cup of coffee or at a restaurant together, and ask this to your partner, to your husband or to your wife. Say, what does intimacy look like on your terms? What does intimacy? Now you can add sexual intimacy if you want to, that's fine, but it's not just sexual intimacy. It's more, how do you receive closeness on your terms? And then what you need is a holy anointed pen and a holy anointed piece of paper, especially the guys, and you need to start writing down what she says. You say, I know exactly what my wife needs. No, you don't, sir. Listen to me. I'm right. You have no idea what your wife needs. You have to learn to write it down and try as best you can to help her with those love languages and how she receives intimacy. And just a little one for the ladies. When your husband is brave enough to tell you how he receives intimacy, please do not burst out laughing. You mustn't. This is very dishonoring to men, and men do not like to feel disrespected or dishonored. So here's some things not to say, ladies, to your man. That's just stupid. Do not say that. That's commandment number 11. There are 10 commandments in the Bible. That's the number 11th. Do not laugh at your husband. Just say, okay, honey, thank you. Thank you for telling me. And write it down.
And I mean, here's a good example of that. Just recently, we spoke to a couple who were just really 3 small children under 7, and just really struggling with the guy's like, she's not interested. She's just, and she's like, I am. Yeah, it's wall to wall children right now. I'm just not interested. And we said, well, how's about what would happen if you communicated to one another? If your husband said, from 2 o'clock this afternoon, you go do whatever you want. You got to have a shower, go get your hair cut, go to the gym, do whatever you want. I will have the children all afternoon and put them to bed. I will feed them and put them to bed. And you come home at 7 o'clock and we will have some time together. And the guy was like, well, I don't see how that's going to change anything. But you saw the woman light up. And you know what? It really worked for them. She just could not cut off from doing childcare all day long and then suddenly switch hats and become his wife, his sexy woman in the bedroom. It was just too much to do that. But the fact that he said, let me take the children. I don't have to work today. Let me take the kids. You go have some time. And then we can have some time together. That's amazing. That's
a really good point. And a deeper, maturer marriage, the woman will be able to verbally express her needs to her husband. He won't have to ask her. She will say, you know what, hun, I need you to take the children. And the husband, in a mature marriage, the husband won't say, women take care of children, men have to go and pray and read the Bible and things like that. No, a mature man will say, I understand. I'll take the children. That's absolutely fine. And you've got a beautiful connection there where two people are allowed to express their needs without being shut down, and then they can come together.
It's the difference between a wife that ought to, or has to, or must do, to a wife that wants to. Because, you know, you've honored one another. Again, you've heard, you've listened, you've heard the need. And instead, you know, probably our children are getting a little bit older now, but even 3 or 4 years ago, if Steve said, you know, oh, how's about Saturday night? We light some candles, we have a date, close the door, have the bedroom to ourselves. I would have to say, you know, hey, you know what? Yep, but they're yours Saturday afternoon. Just give me some space to do what I need to do. And as children get older, that's not such a demand, but it's a huge demand. It's hugely draining on a woman to bear children, to feed them, to nurture them how we should and ought to nurture our children. And it's a two-person role.
Yeah, well said. Chrysolite?
Sure. So, Steve, you owe Emma a romantic date night whenever this is done.
We actually had one 2 nights ago and it was wonderful.
Yeah, we did. It was great.
Oh, lovely. Sure. So, do you want to talk about your children? That's moving a little further from marriage
Yeah.
to children. Yeah. First, if you can share about. I read about how you were barren for some time. So how did
Yes.
you deal with it, and how did you have children, and what is it like having children?
Yes. So we were barren when we first got married. We tried to have children and could not have children for about 4 years. And we did testing, and we found that some of Emma's fallopian tubes were blocked. So we were just unable to have children. And a Christian fertility doctor who offers IVF treatment, that's in vitro fertilization treatment, he offered it to us for free in America because he could see our desperate desire as a young couple to have children. And we tried it 3 times and we did not get pregnant. I then went to Guyana in South America on one of my first missionary trips as a young Christian, and went to my first orphanage in Guyana. And actually it was many Indian children, East Indian children in Guyana. One third of the population in Guyana is from your country, because the Dutch and the British unfortunately took slaves over into Guyana. And this was an orphanage full of East Indian Hindu children who were orphans. And my heart was breaking, and I knew that God was doing something in me. And we had tried to adopt a brother and sister, but the government of that country would not let us, because we were not flying back to our original country, England. We were flying back to America. And I came home heartbroken. We had tried IVF treatment. We couldn't have children. We had tried to adopt. We still couldn't have children. And we were living in a Jewish community at the time, and everyone seemed to have so many children. There were people with like 6, 7, 8 children. I'm like, oh yeah, this is unbelievable. And we would be babysitters for everyone else's children, because everyone knew Steve and Emma wanted children. We would earn $20 and do babysitting for them. But we poured our hearts out to God, and he knew. He was so close and kind during that time. And then one day, miraculously, we'd had lots of people pray for us, but nothing happened. One day, miraculously, Emma conceived a child, and it was a miracle. She should never have conceived a child. And I've got a photo here of our family that you've probably seen. And that child there standing next to me, that boy there standing next to me, he looks just like me. His name is Isaac, and he's 25 years old. That was the child that was conceived back then, miraculously. So God blessed us with a miracle, and we haven't seen many miracles, I have to be honest, but he blessed us with children. And then we went on to have 5 more children of our own. And in the middle of all of those 5 children, we had 5 miscarriages. So we've had 10 pregnancies over the years. 5 children survived. And then we have 3 children in there that are adopted. So they are from other mothers and fathers and different ethnicities. We have a Thai daughter, a Dutch daughter, and a Maori son. Maori people are the people of New Zealand. And then, of course, we have other children that we have fostered. So it's what started very small, really inside of Emma, and the pain that was inside of Emma has turned into an incredible journey together. Emma?
I wouldn't swap the heartache of being infertile. It was quite funny, really, from growing up, never liking children, never babysitting, never wanting children of my own, and then becoming a Christian and having God just birth himself in my heart. I was really challenged to the core and taken through the journey of, I want a baby, like all my other friends have got babies. I want to be a mummy. And then God really challenged me and said, do you want to own something, or do you want to be a mother? And it took me probably 2 years before I was able to say, not my will, but yours, Lord. And actually, I would love to be a mother. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't come from my womb. It matters what I can give to another child. Now, my mum was lovely, but she didn't mother me. We had no relationship. I don't ever remember going out with her. I don't ever remember her saying kind words to me, or telling me I was clever or beautiful. She fed me and she loved me to the capacity that she could, but she didn't inspire me to think that I had anything that was worthy of passing on. And so I really treasure my barren years, because I think I would not have maybe learnt that if God had just said yes the first week I decided that actually I did want to have a child. And it was really special, and I think it stayed in our heart. And even when I first got pregnant, I was like, well, Lord, this is just incredible. And our son was born with a very rare immunological disease that we thought he would die. He had to be fed with a tube. He couldn't eat proper food. And so I was quite confused and a bit mad at God, really. I'm like, what is this? Like a half miracle? You bear a child from a barren womb, and now he's so sick you might die. So we went on yet another journey of trusting God, that his promises do come true. That child is now 25 years old. He didn't die. He eats food now. He still has very bad allergies and asthma, but he's a surgical nurse himself. He's a lover of God. But maybe I say this because sometimes we look at things in the here and now, and we can't see what's down the road. We can only see the pain of the situation we're in now. But hindsight is a very amazing thing, and it's quite complex. But from my years of being barren, I hold that to my heart now. When I have a situation, I'm saying, well, maybe I don't understand, God, why right now you have put this in our path, but maybe I will in 5 years' time. So yeah.
Really good. Well said. Well said. And there's a couple of questions, Chrysolite. There's a
I
couple
will
of
get to
questions.
them. Yes,
Okay.
I will get to those questions. But I thought, we will finish in sequence of talking about marriage,
Yes.
children, and then go there. So my follow-up question is, when do we as a couple decide that we go for adoption? Or as a Christian, can I have an option of IVF? And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So IVF, for those that don't know, is where the sperm and the egg are fertilized outside of the woman's uterus or outside of the woman's body and then placed back into the woman, into the uterus, so that the baby will grow. There are Christians who would say that is not godly to do that because it's interfering with God's creation. And then there are Christians who would say, of course it's okay to do that because we have the technology now and it's okay to do it. So I would say it's a matter of conscience. I will not say yes or no. It's not a right or wrong. We just have to accept that it's not a right or wrong. For some people, it is wrong. For other people, it's okay. A little bit like celebrating Christmas or Diwali, or, eating certain foods, those sorts of things. For some Christians, this is wrong. For some, it's okay. And I think we need to just use wisdom. So regarding IVF, I would say use wisdom. If you feel like you would like to do that, present it before the Lord. You've prayed about whether he will give you children. It doesn't seem to be happening. Then maybe follow that path. Regarding adoption, I would say I can't think of another act that expresses the Father heart of God more than physically taking a child from another tribe and placing them in the middle of the love that a husband has for a wife and a wife has for a husband, and placing a child there. Honestly, it is an amazing journey. We were at the swimming pool today, and my 12-year-old adopted daughter and my 10-year-old adopted daughter were playing with me in the swimming pool, and they were standing on me, and we were diving and playing and just messing around together in the pool. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is the Father heart of God. Both of these children, their fathers abandoned them. We don't know the father of one of them. Both of the mothers, for whatever reason, could not care for these two children. And I don't judge the mother and I don't judge the father, but I can receive them. And God has blessed me for that. I've had 10, 12 years of blessing with these two beautiful girls.
And I think the world over, childbirth and pregnancy and mothering is an intensely intimate cycle for a woman. I remember living and existing knowing that I couldn't have children and really struggling with feeling like I was half a woman for a while there, and that I wasn't capable, that I obviously didn't look like other women. I wasn't going to be able to give my husband offspring that looked like him. And there was a certain amount of grief there. We did do IVF. We did 3 cycles. It is grueling on a woman's body. There's no other way. And it does have long-term, it does heighten your risk of ovarian cancer later in life. Would I say it's wrong or right? No, I would say it's part of your journey of womanhood. And if you feel as a couple that you have to go through that before you can step into adoption, then you know what, that's the journey that you both have to do. I think the problem comes when oftentimes it's the woman is desperate to get pregnant and she will do anything. And the husband is probably a little bit more like, well, But maybe my question, after the years of having children and adopting children, God birthed something in my heart in my years of barrenness for adoption. But if I could have wound the clock back, I probably would have bypassed IVF if I'd have known how amazing adoption was and how it's not that much different, apart from, well, in fact, one of our adopted daughters looks very much like me anyhow, but my other adopted daughter is from Thailand. She looks nothing like me. But there is something, like Steve said, that's so special about loving beyond your border, loving outside of what was given to you, just as God does to us, really. And you guys have the privilege of living in a country that has very tight adoption laws. We spent thousands trying to bring a disabled girl back from India, thousands. And our government had set it all up, and the Indian government said no. They are very tight about Indian children remaining in India. So you guys have probably the biggest adoption pool that is available worldwide, really, outside of maybe China. But China still permits their children to leave and go overseas. So you have a whole sea of beautiful children. And maybe the biggest question is, why do you have to be barren before you consider adoption?
Yeah.
Why not have both?
Yeah, that's great. Chrysaline?
Yes. So there's a question, when you adopt a child, how do you decide this is the child you want to adopt? Do you check their profile, or do you believe on God, making the connection within your heart with that child?
Yes, that's a really good question. And it's a very complex answer. It requires a number of things. I would say with some of our children, we have prayed, we have asked God to speak to us. Should we do this? Shouldn't we do this? And we have heard God's voice speak to us inside of us. There's been, for one child in particular, he spoke to us and said we would take a child that nobody else wanted. What we didn't realize was the reason nobody would want this child was because she was so sick and was nearly dying at birth and needed a lot of hospitalization, and for many years has needed lots and lots of medical care. But we took the child because God spoke to us. There have been other children. Emma mentioned a disabled dwarf child that we were going to adopt from India, that we prayed about. We spent $20,000 US dollars to move the process forward to do an international adoption from India to New Zealand for one particular girl. And we prayed about it. People even donated us money. Somebody gave me $10,000 towards it in one go, 10,000. And we thought that must be God. It must be God. We did psychological assessments for the Indian government. We prayed. And at the final step, they rejected us and we did not take that child. That doesn't make any sense to me. Where is God in that process? Well, he is in the process. That's the point. And he changed us in the process.
I would also say fear around adoption and what might happen is high in everybody's minds when they consider adopting. And you have a very complex caste system in India, and so I can imagine that would bring even more interesting worries and concerns around that. I think there does need to be a time where you're able to say honestly to each other, Could we cope with a child that had its mother had drunk alcohol, that it was going to be brain altered for the rest of its life? Could we cope with a child that was in a wheelchair? Do we only want to look at a child that is able-bodied and that we know some of the history of this child? They're very different, and I think you need to understand and look into what it would be like. Do I want to look after a disabled child? Am I capable? As a marriage, could we take a child that may have had damage from alcohol in the womb, and it's going to struggle with learning at school, it's going to get into difficult situations, it's maybe going to have poor judgment as a teenager? For girls, that's quite a worry. You know, they will invite men into their lives very easily. These children have lifelong struggles, but that's not every child that's up for adoption. You know very well the poverty and the complexities of your society. So I think genetically, 50% of your child is already made up and destined. Their IQ, their personality, their height, their eye color, their educational capacity. And then you can put in your 50% of how you will love and treasure and mother. You know, we took on a Maori child who, his mother was psychotic, she was bipolar, his father was a pedophile, and you would think there could be nothing come of this child, apart from he was quite good looking to look at. The guy was a musical prodigy. He was offered to go to the London School of Music. He was so amazing. Now, was he great in school? No. But God had given him a gift that because he came to us, we were able to see this child can play piano without reading music. This child can hear music far beyond anything that we can do. But you see, if we'd have just looked at fear, we'd have said, no, this is going to be a rough boy. He's going to get into trouble and he's going to be mad like his parents. Now, he does have some mental health issues. Now he's a bit older, but he's also an amazing musician. And we gave him a life that he would never have had. So I think you need to be realistic in adoption, and you need to honestly talk to one another about your capabilities. But then don't let fear ride the situation. Have eyes, ask God, let me see through your eyes, Lord. Let me see. And you know what? When we start doing that and we don't let fear and expectation rule us, we see life in a very, very different manner.
Yeah, it's such an honor for us to talk to so many Indians all in one go. It really is. And you know, one lady, a little Macedonian nun who came to Kolkata some years ago, you know her as Mother Teresa. My prayer now that Mother Teresa has gone to be with Jesus would be that God would raise up many, many nationals who are like Mother Teresa. My goodness, what an incredible example of following Jesus she has been in your country. And my goodness, what would it look like if, yes, India raised lots of successful people, business people, educated people. That's lovely. Blah, 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 blah. That's lovely. But what if God was to raise incredible people like Mother Teresa, who would care for the last, the forgotten, the least, and the lost? I think that would be world changing if that happened.
And just asking one another openly, you know, as a couple, or even as a single person, you know, if I hadn't married, I think I would have still done something very similar.
Yeah.
But to ask the brave question, can I love beyond my borders? Can I love beyond what has come from my womb or what has come from my immediate family?
Yeah.
You know, everybody really would consider taking their sister or their brother's child if something happened.
Yeah.
But to care, there is nothing like it in the world to put your arms around something that is nothing genetically to do with you.
It's unbelievable.
And kiss them and say, I love you. I love you.
It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Chrysolite.
Sure. What do you think is the ideal age for for adoption? Sorry. What is the ideal age for adoption?
I think
Um,
for married couples, I think give yourself a year.
I think it's even the age of the child.
Yeah. So how long you've been married? Maybe 1 year, get to know each other, and then start considering having children or adopting children. The ideal age to adopt a child, the earlier, the better. The earlier a child, a lot happens in the first 5 years of a child's life. We know that from child development, but that doesn't stop you adopting a 10-year-old, because it's not about you. It's about the 10-year-old, and the 10-year-old needs love, and the 10-year-old needs care. So yeah, I would say earlier the better. And I would say at least give 1 year in a marriage where you can develop a relationship together.
And if you wanted to ask any specific question to an orphanage, I would really want to know, where was the child from 0 to 3 years old? Did somebody pick that baby up when it was crying in a cot?
Yeah.
Probably we know many people that have adopted, and the ones that are really struggling are the ones where they've taken children. It doesn't matter if you took an 8-year-old child, as long as somebody addressed the needs of that child in those early years. Because when things aren't forged, when those connections in the brain are not made, it's very hard for them to have to remake them when they're older. It never quite happens. And so you could find a child who's 9 years old, and you think, well, this is too old. But if you go back and you find, well, actually that child lived with the grandmother for the first 4 years before she couldn't cope anymore, and you find out the grandmother was lovely and cherished that child, and when baby cried, somebody met the needs of that baby, you probably won't have any issues with taking a 9-year-old child. And they would take a few years to really establish a deeper relationship with you. But because those healthy connections have been made, life could go well. But you could take a 2-year-old and you say, well, it's fine, he's only 2, he won't ever remember the orphanage. But if his needs were not met, if he just laid there all day, unstimulated, and whether he cried, and in fact, babies, we know they just stop crying in the end. If a child cries and nobody comes to meet their needs, then they stop crying. And that's the dangerous place, because those are the children that manifest quite dysfunctional autistic behavior when they're older. They cannot make social connections properly. They fail to make healthy relationships, and they're really hard to look after.
Yeah, well said.
how is it to raise both your biological children and adopted children together? And then also, would you like to share with us what is the godly way of raising children or godly parenting?
Yeah. So I would say it's quite interesting bringing up children from different tribes and then our own DNA. So we have to be careful saying things like this in our family. These are some of the things we don't say very much in our family. Oh, look at him. He looks just like his father. This is not something we say much at our house. We do say it, and our natural biological children do look like us because that's how God works the whole system out. But it's not necessarily the best thing to say. So we're careful there. We raise the children together. It has its challenges, and you don't love children the same when you have lots of children. You love children differently. Each child needs a certain type of love. And so I think it's probably less about adoption and more about love languages, really, to be honest with you, Chrysolite. I think loving children who are adopted, you learn their love language and you love them. Loving your naturally born children. Please don't get the picture that we have problematic adopted children and really amazing naturally born children. Oh my goodness, nothing could be further from the truth. We have entitled naturally born children. We have naughty naturally born children. We have all kinds of genetic things going on in our naturally born children. So yeah, it's just like anything else. You kind of throw it all into the mix, and you just learn to love and go with the flow.
I think we've also raised our children with a very strong code of loving outside of their borders. And we openly discuss everybody's adoption. In fact, it often comes up, if somebody comes home from school and they say, oh, so-and-so, there's dad has walked out and now it's just the mum, or we have a new child who's a foster child in our class. And our children know some of the pain of listening to children cry into their pillows because they've been taken from their parents because of bad situations. Our youngest child, she's nearly 11, and she knows that her birth mum was a failure and she couldn't look after her. And she's a lovely girl, but she's a broken girl. And we're able to talk about that. We see other parts of that family, and that's always going to be a hard thing in her life, and we can't take that away. You can never take away from an adopted child that their life starts with a loss. Don't ever think that the love that you can give them will make that up, because you'll be sad forever. You have to honor, like you honor your partner and their differences. You honor that child lost something before they came to you, and that will always be the silent person in every frame of their life. But they can love around it and they can love over the top of it. And in order for you to be a good mother, you have to train them to love around that, to love over it. Nobody has a perfect life. Some people have grown up with really bad parents. They weren't adopted, but they probably would have been better off to be, because of the damage that their parents have done to them.
Yeah.
So we try and raise our children that there is no special person that gets away going through life without something going on. But we learn to be overcomers, and we learn to be bold, and we love boldly, and we are brave, and we will love outside of our differences, outside of our colors, and to be human beings of tomorrow. That's what we need to be. We're going to be a multicultural society where kindness and love has to ride over the top of all of it.
Yeah, well said. Chrysaline?
So do you find it difficult or hard disciplining your biological children and adopted children? Or what is your way of disciplining children?
Oh, disciplining children. Can we end this right now, please? This is next question. So the first half, we have 8 children, and the first 4, they are currently 25, 23, 22, and 20. So they're older. They've left home. The first 4, they laugh at us, mum and dad, because we are so different in the way that we discipline our children. Oh my goodness. They complain about it. They say that we are too soft on our younger children. They say, Mum and Dad, when we were at home, we couldn't have any secular music, any non-Christian music.
Or Sky TV.
Mum and Dad, we had no cable TV, Sky TV, or Wi-Fi. Mum and Dad.
It's because we couldn't afford it. We had 8 children.
Mum and Dad, we could never do this,
Get
and
Nike
this.
trainers.
We never had Nike trainers when we were kids. Mum and Dad, you were so serious. Mum and Dad, we had to go to church all the time. Church, church, church. And then the younger children were like, yeah, whatever.
No, we don't say whatever.
We do.
What we do, what I found to be the most effective parenting is to actually, each child has a different thing that is very special to them. you know, it's no point if a child that likes their alone time, if their discipline is to send them to their room, that's not a discipline. That's like, okay, off I go then. But so we have a saying in England, you hit them where it hurts. So for a 15-year-old, if they are disobedient, they're grounded, because actually to not be with their friends is the biggest punishment. For our 11-year-old, you pull the Wi-Fi cord.
Oh yeah, pull the Wi-Fi cord. Yes.
For our 10-year-old, you give her lines.
Oh, lines.
You discuss what she's done wrong and
Oh.
say, you're going to write that out for me 20 times.
She looks at you with this.
And she hates it.
Oh.
But so we have found that discussing with them, to lord over a child does not bring respect from a child. It's a bit like in a marriage when you lord over. You must do this. You must cook this meal. You must come to bed. You must watch this or not watch this or go to this place. It's very similar with children. Respect is earned. And I believe that we grow healthy, happy children when we listen to them, when their voice is heard, when you can negotiate. And obviously there are some things that you just absolutely don't negotiate on. If somebody is rude or disrespectful or nasty to somebody else or doesn't do the jobs that they've been assigned to do, you get one verbal warning and then you are disciplined. And no amount of tears, if it's gone, if Wi-Fi is gone for a day, then Wi-Fi is gone for a day. You can beg and plead and wail,
but just so we can answer the question, because I know it will be in the back of people's minds. We do not use any physical violence, any physical touch on each other in our marriage. There's never, we just don't do that. We do not hit. That is unacceptable. So I don't care what culture you come from in a marriage, for a man to hit a woman or a woman to hit a man, unacceptable. And I do not think that there needs to be, I think there are better ways to raise and discipline children instead of hitting them, although we did used to do that with our earlier children.
Just the first two children.
Just the first two. But we do
we just
not
found
do
it
that
to
now.
be very crazy. It's like, I am hitting you because you hit someone. It doesn't make sense to hit a child because they've done something wrong. We've just seen much better results from actually teaching one another respect and negotiation, and being, you know, our 10-year-old at the moment, her thing is, if somebody upsets me, I'm going to storm out of the room and slam the door. And we're like, well, where's that going to get you when you're older? How's that going to work out with your boyfriend?
Or your husband?
Or your boss? I said, unless you can use your words and actually say, you did something that upset me, you have made me angry, and negotiate that, you're never going to get anywhere. So
we have to teach you. Chrysolite.
Have you ever differentiated your biological and adopted children? If you haven't, but how do you ensure that your natural children do not differentiate the adopted children?
Yeah, that's really good. You kind of develop family culture. So developing family culture is really important. And everyone listening to us will have their own way of developing a family culture. And that's, you work on that and you develop your values. And so for us, family culture is, I would say, probably a very high value would be kindness. Do you think?
There isn't any differentiation. I think children don't naturally put themselves one over another, but they will respond to exactly how the parents set the tone.
Yeah.
So there has been a time I can remember when my son made a stupid comment. There's only 9 months between my 10-year-old and 11-year-old. And my son had learnt the phrase at school, you know, oh, you're adopted. You must be adopted. You're so stupid. And we came down on him real hard.
Yeah.
Because he was speaking from his place of, well, I am an entitled child. I am born of these parents, my security. But we looked across the table at his sister, who was adopted, and he hadn't realized in his childlike manner what he'd said. But, you know, she sat there thinking, so does it mean I'm stupid because I'm adopted?
Yeah.
Is that like suddenly that's a second best? And, you know, we've always told our adopted children, you know, that they were chosen. They were chosen. They didn't just come from our womb. They were chosen.
Or another line we've used is that adopted children, children grow inside mummy's tummy, but adopted children, they grow just slightly higher inside mummy's heart. And that's kind of a good little language. So they're both connected to mummy, you know, both children grew inside mummy, but one grew inside the physical tummy and then, or uterus, and then the other grew inside the heart. And that's a beginning language of adoption with young children. And that's proved to be really helpful to us. Chrysolite.
Okay. Is adoption fine for a single parent?
Yeah, I think it is. Go
Okay, it
ahead,
has a
Chrysolite.
follow-up question. Can you throw light on the process of it and any suggestions you can share?
I can't throw light on the process in India and your cultural setting. And most of you here are calling in from India. So I won't comment on that. That would just be how that's perceived in your culture.
You just have to look at government regulations.
You need to look at government regulations, but also look at the culture you are in, the particular caste you're in, and the particular town you're in. Personally, I think it is absolutely fine for a single person in the body of Christ to adopt if they're choosing not to be married and they don't, or they're divorced and it just hasn't worked out to remarry, but they would love to care for children, then I think that's a great thing to do. I think of some of the nuns who are not married who care for children. So I think that's identifying a mothering instinct, especially in women, that doesn't have to involve marriage and sexual intimacy and birthing your own children. You can still be a mother, hence Mother Teresa was called Mother Teresa, but she didn't have a husband or her own children. So yeah, I think it's absolutely fine. And we work with people in New Zealand who are single and will want to adopt children. I think the downside of it is that it's proven sociologically and psychologically that children do grow best with a man and a woman to help them in their development. So I think as long as a single person recognizes that they are a single person, they can't do both, and that they're to surround themselves in community where other women or other men can kind of fill in some of the gaps, if you like, to that child. I think that's great.
I think our government, they are really keen on if a single, I think they'd be a little bit more wary about a single man adopting, I have to say, but a single woman would have the opportunity to adopt. But they would have to prove that there are the male role models in the life of that child, extended family, uncles, friends, church people. And I think what I would say to any single woman that wanted to adopt, in fact, we do know an American worship leader that adopted. I think it probably changes you more than you think. No more than it would if you had had a child of your own womb. But it changes who you are. You are not a single woman anymore. You are a mother. And so therefore, if you are still looking for a partner, you are now a single mum looking for a partner. And which is okay, because there are many of those. But I think don't think that adoption will be any less than it would be having a baby from your own womb and raising it. It will still change you from being a single woman to a mother, and that is a massive status change, and not to be taken on lightly, and not to be taken on without people around you that can support you. Because it's a big shift to suddenly, whether you take on a baby, a 5-year-old, or a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. If you took a sibling set, fantastic thing to do, super exciting, but don't underestimate the change that it will be in you to do it.
Sure. So one of the participants has a very interesting question on what are your thoughts on surrogacy?
It depends on the context, but the amazing thing, it depends on the context. So in a sense, if, let's say, Steve and Emma couldn't have children, but Steve and Emma knew a Christian couple who were very fertile, and the relationship between the two women was such that she said, look, I would love to carry a child for you. Oh my goodness. I think that's amazing. Personally,
I think it's fraught with dangers. I think it's emotionally a very highly charged situation that I would have to say at the end of the day, go back to the question earlier, or maybe my answer, do you want to own something? Do you want to mother? If you want to mother, there is a sea of children that need mothering and fathering in your country. And I think my heart, I get sad when I hear about the surrogacy, because I think oftentimes it's poorer, more vulnerable women that end up carrying children for people. And is that the best? I'm not so sure. To be honest, I don't know of one that's gone well. I mean, I've read about a couple in magazines, but I often hear of hurt feelings, pregnant women that then back out when they've 8 months pregnant, or they see their baby and money has already been handed over, hopes and dreams have been built up. In our country, in New Zealand, it's incredibly hard, like maybe 2 or 3 babies a year come up for adoption, maybe not even that. In your country, there would be many, many more. It would be, Steve and I have often thought, we would love to live in India, and then we can just take 10 children.
Well, we love your food. We love your people. I mean, I think we're Indian, actually, to be honest with you. I think we are actually Indian, but we just don't look like Indians, okay?
So maybe my question to that question would be, why? Why would you want to do that?
Yeah, good question.
And what is the impact on everybody? Yeah.
Okay.
Britta?
Yeah, sure. I know toxic relationships exist, at least in love. Do you think there is toxic in marriages as well? And there is something called as toxic parenting. When is it too early to recognize it, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so without a doubt, there is toxicity in marriage. And I would say some of the areas where it gets hidden most in marriage is in Christian marriages. Now, that's going to surprise a lot of you, because we can, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we can coat over toxicity with what I call God talk. God told me, I'm the man, I'm in charge. We're going to do this. You will do this. That's very, very toxic language and behavior.
I think the best way to recognize it is back to what we said earlier. If there's no negotiation, if one person is lording over another person, then that's toxic, because things get toxic when they don't have fresh air, when something comes in and it can't go out, when it becomes poisoned. So anytime that parents have to lord over their children and demand and force things, I'd say that's toxic. Anytime that you are trying to imprint with force onto another human being, you're toxic.
But I would say this about parenting: if your 3-year-old child is running towards a lake and there are 2 tigers about to eat the child, you can lord it over your 3-year-old child right then. Okay, you can say, stop! That you're allowed to do that then. Okay, but we're talking about just in general life.
But if you raise your daughter with bitterness as a mother, that you poison her with her outlook on men and life and what she should expect out of her life, subtly through 16 years of raising her, you know what, that's toxic parenting. But if you have raised a child to know that the world is there for her to live and grow from, that it's a place to be honored and respected, that she herself is honored and respected, that her body belongs to nobody but herself, then you know what, that's not toxic parenting. But sometimes we bring stuff from our own childhood and suddenly children arrive, and it's not until we start outworking it and we see this mirror back to us in our own children that we think, oh, do I really sound like that?
Yeah.
So children are a really good refiner, because
and a mirror.
Yeah,
they are.
You can look and you say, well, this is it. This is the fruit of my life.
Yeah.
That'll put you on your knees to pray.
Chrysolite.
How should a lady deal with a husband who doesn't believe in Christianity, but she wants him to turn his heart to Jesus? How to encourage and drill his faith that Lord Jesus is the only living God if he doesn't want to read Bible?
Yeah, very good. Great question. And it's one of those questions that actually gets a direct answer in the Bible. So in 1 Peter, it says, if your unbelieving husband and you remain with him, it says you will win him without a word. That's what the Bible teaches. It says he will see your holy conduct, he will see your inner kindness, and he will be won over to follow Jesus. So for the woman who has a non-following of Jesus, non-Christian husband, that is the only relationship that woman can, it's commanded in the Bible, where she can lead that person to Jesus by not telling them about Jesus. It's amazing. It's the one relationship. Everyone else, that woman has to talk about Jesus, tell people about Jesus, but her unbelieving husband, she wins him by her actions. And men love respect. Most men love physical touch. So we're going to have to up the respect levels, ladies, and the physical touch levels. Come on, girls, you can do it. But even if he's not a follower of Jesus, and what you don't want to be doing is comparing him to all of those lovely, kind, godly men at church. Don't do that. That's not good.
And I think it's really important. You know, we talk to a lot of women in this situation, and I wish we got to speak to them when they were dating, because actually the question was way back when you were dating your non-Christian boyfriend, either you're okay with that and you love him and it doesn't matter to you that he doesn't share your love of God and going to church. But I think you need to be honest with yourself. You know, we spoke to one young lady and she said, but I married him hoping that I would win him to the Lord. And I thought, no, you really didn't. You married him because you loved him. And somewhere along the line, you thought that you hoped that maybe he might go to church. And now 20 years on, she's all depressed and, you know, well, he won't mix with my church friends. But actually, she made that decision a long time ago. And I wish somebody had had a conversation with her back then, because I think the worst insult to another human that you can do is marry them in the hope that you will change them. I think that's rough. I don't want to be married hoping that someone might convert me. I'd like to be married because somebody loves and treasures and desires me for who I am. So I think you've slid onto very dicey ground as soon as you've entered into something like that.
Of course, that is different if you married and then the lady becomes a follower of Jesus during the marriage. That's a different dynamic. But I think, look at your husband and look at him as part of God's creation. Maybe he practices another religion. Maybe he doesn't carry your Christian values, but find the gold inside of him, because God has placed it there. Our divine DNA is already inside of each and every one of us, or as the shops say, the batteries are already included. So there's a God DNA inside every man, but it takes a bit of uncovering to find. And talk to him about his interests. Involve yourself in his life, show respect to him, hug him, be kind to him, be a comfort to him. And the Bible is clear, you will win him without a word.
And probably the most damage that we've ever, when talking to these couples, the guy, if it's the guy that's the non-Christian and the wife that's super spiritual, it's eaten him up that he's always his wife has always appeared to be more holy than him, more righteous than him, that he is the unsaved heathen in the family. And they almost start living out of that role play that they've been given.
That's actually really toxic coming from the Christian. That's actually really toxic, because I've met a lot of people where one person is the Christian and the other person is not. But the person who is the Christian has the bad mental health, and the person who is practicing another religion has the good mental health. It's crazy. And we got to be super careful here, guys and gals, that we develop kindness, develop good mental health, and really honor and respect one another, regardless of the outcome. Crystalite.
There's another very practical question, who's asking that any magic tips to take over all the chores of the home and outside the home and not get tired about it.
The magic is in ownership. Chores need doing. Get over yourself. Chores need doing. And whatever spiritual life you think other people lead, the reality is chores need doing. Things need cleaning, things need purchasing for the house, stuff needs doing. For goodness sake, get over yourself. But negotiate it with your partner, because you don't want to be doing it out of obligation and feeling resentful that your partner is sitting around watching Oprah Winfrey and eating potato chips on the couch while you're doing all the chores.
I talk to a lot of women about house cleaning, and it's funny. I feel like the older I get, 20 years ago, women would not really complain in Western society about staying home with their children, or doing the housework, or cooking a meal. But now I speak to a lot of young girls that are I don't want to do that. I don't want to cook the meals. I don't want to look after the children, and I certainly don't want to to do the housework. And
I have an Instagram account to update. My Pinterest hasn't been looked at today, and I need to check Facebook.
And you need me time.
Me time.
So, but I would say that, you know, everybody does it differently, but I could not wake up and think, okay, today is house cleaning day. I am going to clean my house for 6 hours today, and I'm going to do all the laundry, because you know what, I wouldn't want to get out of bed. It'd be like, nah, that's every day has got to have some fun things in it. So for me, I do 30 minutes of housework every day. There is never one big day that is house cleaning day or laundry day. And I use my words when I want my children to help, or my husband to get washing off the line if he's free.
How do you ask me to get washing off the line?
Steve, get the washing off the line, please.
Okay, then.
Now, there's no point in me slamming and banging around the kitchen while Steve's trying to watch a soccer game, and me being incredibly angry with him because I want him to actually go and read a story to the children and put them to bed. It would be better for me to use my words and say, hey, Steve, how's about your children are just going to bed? How's about you pause that game that you recorded? Could you just spend 15 minutes and go and see the children?
No, I don't want to. I want to watch the game.
Well, you're lost. Your children are being put to bed and you've missed out.
I'll pause the game. Chrysolite, we're going to have to wrap this up. I think we'll do 2 more questions, Chrysolite. Is that okay?
My children are waiting for their dinner.
We just had a text from the Central Command, which is in our dining room. And apparently there is a civil war breaking out in our dining room.
I can imagine that.
I'm not sure what tribal grouping has come and begun the attack on my people, but I think it might be a civil war within the people group. It's something to do with food needing to be fed to them. It's something like there's a food shortage, I think, and there's rioting in our house. Okay, so you know, I got a text. And so maybe 2 more questions and we must go.
Okay. Do you want to share with us a little more about Jeremiah Trust?
Yes. So Jeremiah Trust started about 16 years ago because in New Zealand, there is a very high abortion rate. So women who terminate their pregnancies, we have a culture that finds that acceptable and okay. And I personally do not find that acceptable or okay. And we were both deeply inspired by Mother Teresa, working in India, you know, and she said these words. She said that the medicine for abortion is adoption. So Mother Teresa was a very quiet person. She was quite a feisty, tough lady, but she was very quiet in the way she cared. And she basically said to the Indian people, bring us your children. We will take care of them. If a mother cannot love her own child, we will love your children. And that really touched the core of Indian culture and has touched the core of the whole world, if we're honest. And so we definitely followed in the line of Mother Teresa, and we made an offer to every single woman in New Zealand who was pregnant with an unwanted child. And we have said, we want that child.
But the second half of the Jeremiah Trust really is around women and choices. And as you well know, it's quite funny that the pro-choice movement it doesn't really have a choice. It's either you kill your child, you terminate, or you live with your child. And, you know, sometimes that's not always the best option. And to us, that there was no choice. That high school kids were becoming pregnant, and they were not being presented with a choice. They were being presented with either you have this child and that is the end of your educational career and your life, or you terminate this child and you carry on having the life that you thought you were going to have, which never happens because you can't ever get away from the fact that you have conceived a child and you have terminated that goes on to have significant mental health issues for women. So we really felt passionately that most of the time it is young women, that they were given a space, because we believe that there is a third choice, and that is adoption. Or that is just being allowed the space and the time. Often these children, and they are children, these young women are thrown out of their homes. Their mothers say, no, 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 you're not having a baby, not under this roof. So we felt really strongly that we should provide a safe place. And we actually now work alongside the government to provide a safe place for local girls, and sometimes not so local, where they can come as pregnant women, and we can talk about what adoption looks like. They can live in our family and they can see what it's like, how we treat our adopted children. And so we really hope to raise the profile of adoption as being a far more holistic option for women and children, with the right education and the right opportunities. So, yeah.
Okay, because this is my last question, I'm going to blend a couple of questions into it.
That's cheating.
Okay. How do you perceive your individual purpose, then function one as a couple,
Yeah.
and then you bring honor to God through your marriage, and then how do you function as a whole family being the church?
Yeah, really good. You asked about 27 questions there, Chrysolite. That is very naughty.
You go first.
Look, I think it is it's down to being and not doing. And because those questions are so big, and because our particular family is so big, we would never be able to do the Christian life, but we can be followers of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference. So we try to recognize the gift that's in Emma, the gift that's in me, just by virtue of being a human, and celebrate that before God. So how that sounds in prayer is, Lord, today I thank you that I am me. I'm the only me that there is, and I'm really thankful for that. Now, I don't pray that very often because it sounds a bit weird, but it is what I believe.
Yeah.
I believe that for my wife, and then I believe it for every single one of my children. And I promise everyone listening to my voice right now, when you accept your partner for being who they are, and you accept yourself as who you are, the natural outflow comes in the children. And when you get all of our children together, and there's a party or a meal or jokes and messing around and playtime together, it is a formidable force.
Well, it's like a well-cut diamond. You know, a diamond is cut with many faces to it, and every face reflects out at a different angle on life. And when you have a family, every one of our children has a different outlook on life. They will reflect the glory of God in a different way. So I think it is about a sense of being. I don't think it's as hard as I think it happens quite naturally.
Yeah.
When you find yourself in God, you naturally, and you both find yourself in God, you know what, you naturally make a bubble, and the children will just radiate out from that. Like, I mean, the picture I have as soon as you spoke was of a well-cut diamond. You will reflect the glory of God, and it doesn't take any more effort than the effort it took you to be who you are this week. As you walked around, well, how did you become who you are? Well, you just lived and you had your being. And that's what happens as a family.
There are times when, as we've got older, because Emma and I are really old now, I mean, we are old, trust me.
But he is older than me.
No, like we're like 95 years old, both of us, but we just look good because we come from New Zealand. But no, anyway, so I'm 51, Emma is 49. But there are many times that we, in English, we say, stop and smell the roses. We just stop and we look around at creation, at a tree or a mountain or a river or a plant or a piece of grass or a small animal or some of our children, and we just kind of pinch each other, grab each other and say, look, stop, just look, smell the roses.
In fact, we have a code in our family. We go like this, like we were pretending to take a photo.
Yeah,
and it's like, capture this moment in time.
Remember the moment.
Not that we ever do, because we're quite ancient and we forget everything. Steve loses his glasses every day.
They've gone. God bless you, Crystal. I hope it's been helpful. I have to pick up just one comment because it's gone public and it's come up on the chat, and it says, in our culture, men don't do chores. That's what it says on the chat. Well, I'm like, guys, get a life. If you want to be a sexy Indian Christian man, you do the chores around the house, brother. You might be breaking the mold of your culture, but
you might be twice as effective by the sounds of it.
Yeah, man.
As women are be twice as shocked. Look out, ladies.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a wife and you're an Indian Christian man, make sure you put that up on your profile on the singles dating site.
They will be falling over you.
I do my own chores. I can do your chores too. Oh yeah, come on.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much, Steve and Emma. As expected, there's a lot that you guys have shared. I know we are crunched by time, and I'm sure most of them do have questions also. But thank you so much. It's a lot for us to chew during this week and to see how God can minister to us in everyone for joining. All of you have a blessed weekend.
And you.
We hope to see you again. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.